Welcome to this week's edition of the DoD Contract Academy podcast. This week's a little bit different. This week I have a company on called Forces Horizon. So I'm going to talk to them a little bit about their technology, what their plan is with the government. But I want, if you're a company or if you're a veteran or you're just getting started in government contracting, I want to kind of preface this with why you should listen to this episode. What this company does is they have an AI tool which is designed for veterans that are transitioning from the military that takes their experience and matches that to different job opportunities. They work with companies and help them find veterans with the right experience. You've probably heard, because this is something that happens often, unfortunately, which is that it can be difficult for military members to find the right employment opportunities after they get out, because it's hard for a business, especially somebody that hadn't been in the military, to understand, hey, what is this person good at? What's their skill set? So we get into an in-depth conversation about that. The reason it's important for you as a business is that some of the best sales executives, especially if you're selling to the Department of Defense, any of the services, are going to be somebody that served in the military. Now, we could teach them to sell to the government, but I can't teach you to have a military background. So there's going to be a bond there. They have a network. There's a lot of great reasons to hire someone from the military. And then if you happen to be a veteran, this is a really interesting episode because this tool essentially takes all of your military experience and turns that into things like resumes, and it matches you with different jobs that you might not have thought worked for you. So it's a really interesting episode, and stick around too if you are interested in government funding for technology startups, because that's what they are. They're a tech startup. So we talk a little bit about the SBIR process. That's towards the end. And what I'm seeing right now, like because it is a competitive process, but there are some areas where you are going to be more competitive than your peers. So stick around for that. Hopefully this episode resonates with you. And then next week, we're going to come back with part 3 of our 3-part series on leads, meetings, pipeline, how to win those government contracts. So thanks again, and we'll see you at the end of the episode. One of the hardest things for any company selling to the government is getting their sales process down and building a sales team that can actually win contracts. If that sounds like you, then I want you to go to dodcontract.com. We have offerings for different levels, depending on where you are in business. The very high end, we will build your sales team for you and run that sales team, establish the CRM, put all the processes in place. So you essentially get a sales team built for you that can win and close contracts. Now, at the lower end, you can subscribe to DoD Contract Academy. You get all of the courses that will teach you how to sell to the government, and the CRM tool called GovClose, which we developed just for federal sales. This is a really great offer. So that at that low end, it's a price that's affordable, where you can get all of the training and the CRM tool, and you get group coaching every couple of weeks, where we could sit down and talk to you about what your problem sets are and help you win those contracts. If either of those sound good, head on over to dodcontract.com. And if neither of them sound good, at minimum, go check out our book at Amazon. The book is called The Government Contract Planner by me, Richard C. Howard. Check that out at Amazon. Please leave a review as well. It comes with a free companion course. So you don't get everything that you get in DoD Contract Academy, but you get a little taste. Get a little taste if you buy the book on Amazon. So please head on over, grab that, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, and now on to our interview with Forces Horizon. This week I have Forces Horizon on, and this one is near and dear to my heart as a veteran. And you're going to hear about some of the technology and the great work that these guys are doing. I have Devin Smith, who's the CEO of the US, portion of Forces Horizon. And I've got Ben Robb, who's our UK representative on the other side. So he's the CEO of the UK piece of this. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so I'm not gonna choose, but one of you, if you could introduce Forces Horizon, why you started it, what it's doing now, what you want it to do, the objective, everything. Let's just dig into it so we have that up front.
Ben, you want to take that, your baby?
Yeah, well, I think Devon's going to have a lot more to say about later elements, so I'm happy to get my bit in now. But so Force Horizon, the concept arrives, and it's something that Devon and I both saw firsthand when we were officers in the Army, when we saw that servicemen and women who have sometimes incredibly sophisticated skill sets, attributes, and qualities that are cultivated in the military and are very desirable in the civilian world, but don't necessarily have obvious parallels in the civilian world. We're struggling to represent themselves in a way that maximize their value in civilian employment, in second careers, and in their lives more broadly in the civilian world. And we thought that's a problem. And it's also an inefficiency because people spend, however many years, whether it's 4 or 30 years in the military, and they develop these amazing skill sets. And there's a mismatch, there's a mismapping between what people do in service and how they see themselves and how they're seen in the civilian world. And we thought that's a problem that we wanted to solve. And we'd actually been looking at it from a number of angles, but the advances in large language models and generative AI have really enabled us to do what we're doing. And it's a really fortunate combination of us starting this and those advances happening at the same time, because the military, by its nature, has a regimented system of language. It has, you can infer a huge amount of information from someone's job role, someone's rank, and anyone who's in service will be able to do that instinctively. But people in the civilian world generally can't, and huge technical skill set within that. And the beautiful thing about large language models is they love that kind of language. It's standardized, there's the right degree of variance because different roles within ranks and different units creates variety, but it's not so varied that it's going to be producing nonsense. That's the beauty of it, really. And that's the basis for our model and helping transfer those skills.
So Forces Horizon is essentially it's a AI kind of chat GPT program for military members that helps them translate their skills from the military into language that companies are going to understand. So I'm assuming this is going to help them with things like applying for jobs, maybe putting a resume together. Or does it build your resume for you?
So I can jump on that. So the core thing is it does a couple of things. One is it builds your resume. So it goes through, you plug in your information, and it helps you build a resume that's editable, also comes out in multiple formats. And then on the second half is that it builds looks into your skills and profiles, and working on that part right now to really flesh out not only obvious things such as typical Army project manager for officers, right? That's a stereotype when it comes to project manager. But trying to look beyond that, look at some of the skills from all the different military schools that you took. What sort of skills does this guy have? Or girl, and where could it go in the future? Where in the civilian world might they be a fit? Because a lot of times, I think military risk of being pigeonholed a little bit.
Yeah.
We're trying to help break that out. And it's a two-sided problem. One, you've got the military people on this side who need to understand what their value, their worth, and skills are. And then you have the civilian people who need to be like, this dude is better for something than just kicking in doors, or, they have to break that stereotype as well. And so we're trying to work on both sides. And so we've got the military facing side to help them understand their skills, but we're also working with companies, and we're trying to build out that side to help them understand, help them pull it.
Okay. No, that's interesting. How are you working? Because I would imagine on the military side, I would be looking at this to help me translate what I'm doing and build my resume out. Maybe even, I don't know does it give you in addition to your resume, is it giving you ideas for jobs? Because you mentioned, hey, we're trying not to pigeonhole people as a program manager, but I would imagine you're training it, and I'm making some assumptions here, but so if I plug in, I was an acquisitions officer, a company may not understand exactly what that is. Language model, you may understand hey, that's something that Ricky managed $82 billion in contracts, and that's something that may resonate with a company, looking for someone that's actually had experience dealing with a high level of funding and contract. Am I going down the right?
You are 100% down the right path. Yeah, and it is, like you said, I think it's important to emphasize that about training. That is a real important thing with these language models. Right now, it does come up with more generic stuff, but the more it gets used, the better it gets. Go about its way, and that we can more tailor it so that we can start to pull out those acquisition things. But hey, this is important. This is what that means. It's definitely a process to it, but that is the direction you're heading. And already on our website right now, as you create your profile, it will come up some suggested jobs.
Well,
You
interesting.
know,
Maybe, I don't know if we can do a demo on the podcast, but it'd be nice to jump into it if we can. If not, we don't have to. But I did want to ask, how does it help companies? So I get it. This might be something I can do. I think anyone in the military that's getting ready to transition out, even if you're not and you just want to get a resume or put something together, this would probably be an interesting process to go through to see what you guys have done and get some benefit out of. But what if I'm a company or a business owner? And because a lot of people listen to the podcast are business owners that are selling to the government and selling to the DoD. And so they're going to be, and I always tell people, if you're going to hire someone to help you sell to the Department of Defense, there's no better person to hire than a former military person from the service that you're trying to sell to. But that company might not really understand if I put somebody's OPR or a performance report in front of them from the Army or the Air Force or whatever branch. There's a lot of my wife doesn't even want to listen to me when I start talking because it's like another language. How do you help companies? Do you help them decipher through some of that?
yeah, 100%. Comes the crux of the platform. Like Ben was talking to, he found that there was loads of service members with great skills that didn't know how to translate that skills. Core mission, I would say, of this product is to translate military skills so they're relevant to civilian recruiters. And on the back end, for specifically for businesses that use our platform, it becomes a clearinghouse of good military candidates that have translated their skills to a certain extent. So there's that easy win, but also we work with them to try. They plug it in. They're looking for these 10 traits.
Mhm.
We can go through our system and our system identify people with those traits. And we're like, Staff Sergeant so-and-so has 8 of these traits and we think they might be a pretty good match. And we can start like making those links up. And Ben has already worked with companies to when they've got, like, hey, we've got specific resume requirements. Maybe we want to see no more than 1 page resume, whatever, or they've got a certain format that's just a standard in their company. Then they can specify that. And then that service person, staff sergeant so can say, I'm applying to this company and this company's preferred resume style is X. I'm going to have a resume generate in X. The system will do that for it. And then I can set the application.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So it sounds like you also do a little bit of matchmaking then.
Yeah. So I can probably speak a bit to that. There's a number of ways that we create efficiencies, both of time and cost and access for companies. And we also work with different types of companies. So there's the sort of large enterprise organizations that often already will have some sort of veteran outreach. But unless that's matched with correct representation on the side of the service person, it's never going to be optimally effective. So that's how us helping the service person helps the company. But then on the other side, for these sorts of clients, there is that matching element. And to be honest with you, that's our whole model is trained on military data. And we're also looking to other elements of defense and security, but that's what we're training on. So everything we do is bespoke to that audience. But it is just a useful HR tool because it saves HR teams spending hours trawling through resumes.
Mhm.
We've got efficiency there already because we've generated the resume and we know it's HR industry standards. We know the service person is well represented. They don't have to make too much inference or do too much of their own translation. But also we can then match candidates to roles which will never be the final say, and it shouldn't be the final say. Companies, there's always got to be the human decision maker at the end of it. But it also creates an efficiency from that point of view. And our other type of client they are recruiters, because recruiters will often want to place service personnel and they also will sometimes struggle to recognize what acronyms mean, what the technical skill set is, because if you're a sergeant in the infantry, for example, throughout your career, the more militaristic elements of your role will be emphasized and will be of central importance. But when you leave, a lot of the administrative side of things and a lot of the sort of, the pastoral side of things, and that becomes more important, and we can help emphasize that. So we can also work with recruiters to help them save time outsourcing, writing those CVs, the time it takes for them to identify those characteristics themselves. So it's about matchmaking. It's also about saving time
Mhm.
and doing things very efficiently. So I think that's what we offer to all parties, really.
Okay. What do you charge? We don't have to get into the exact price, but if I'm on the military side of it, is this something that I'm going to pay a monthly subscription for? Or is it what kind of fees am I expecting?
So it's entirely free. So it's entirely free for service users. So anyone leaving the military, and the other thing, returning to your initial question briefly about it being a GPT designed for veterans, there is an element of that to it. And the data's trained on that, but it also goes well beyond what those sorts of brilliant but general services do, because it's not a case of you say, I did this, what's my skill set? It does do that in the background, but it formats it for you. It creates a resume for you. You can then edit our resume on the platform. You can download it in different formats. It gets exposure to employers.
Yeah.
So there is the GPT side of things, but which is central to what we do. It's also combined with a lot of other efficiencies. But yeah, it's free. In answer to your initial question, it is free for service personnel.
That's awesome. By the way, I just signed up. I looked aside for a second here. I just wanted to see how fast I could sign in and get an account here. So I just signed into your system. So you see Rick Howard in there. I just got an email back by Force Horizon. What would the process be? So I signed up. Now, how do I use it? I verify my email. I get into the system and it's free. What are the next steps here? Maybe talk me through what I'd be doing.
Yeah. So you get the verification email that comes back, and then it's going to prompt you to start building your profile out. This profile is going to work through just your military career, basic headline information. Who are you? Where do you live? Work through your military career, and it'll ask you any civilian information, where you went to university at, kind of education, other certifications you may have, just the general resume stuff. You put a decent amount of information there. The more kind of detailed information you give it to a certain extent, is the better it'll do. Because obviously, well, we are working with GPT and they are advancing by leaps and bounds right now. It can't know your personal story. So if you were the top 5% of your class, like you have to tell it that.
Yeah.
And that's just understanding the limitations of the system. But yeah, you submit that and in a couple minutes, it'll generate your resume and it'll send you an email to go back on, log on. And you can go back on and you'll see your profile on the top page. And then you'll also see your resume. That's going to be completely editable and it'll be the different formats. And that's the basic process.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, no. And so for everyone watching or listening, I just created an account. It was really simple. Now, is there an ability to upload documents in here or is it mainly right now just type it in?
Not yet. So that is something that we've talked about, especially important for me on the US side, is to be able to, also a background, I'm Army. So when I say, I apologize to any Navy folks or anybody that listen to this, but so when I talk about, I'd like to see it so that it can parse like OERs and SOERs, any sort of evaluations, DD-214. Any of that information would be great. However, that's just time and development. It's significant development cost. So we are looking at that, and that may be future iterations, but for right now, it's primarily just the information that you put in.
Okay, very cool. And so from here, so you have the system, you're making changes to it. It sounds like it has a lot of benefit both to commercial world, to the military man or woman. Are you looking at the government right now? Government contracting, investing from there?
We are just in the beginning of that process. So I've spun up a LLC here. So Force Horizon, since Ben was the initial founder that started in UK, seeing that, but I've spun up an LLC here so that I'm pursuing the Disabled Veterans Small Business Certification. So working on that. And then from there, we will start looking at SBIR and kind of funds that fit the bill. So we're in the initial phases of that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. And there's a lot of investment going on in AI right now. And clearly there's a benefit to the military, man or woman. There's clearly a benefit to corporations and businesses. I think there's a clear benefit to the government as well. So this could be used for something like the Transition Assistance Program in the US military. That is probably the clearest use that I could think of for. But in addition, there are different programs within the military and the other government organizations have their own versions of an HR department, right? So I would bet a tool like this would help match individuals with their skill sets, help identify them for different positions and things like that. So there's probably a lot of iterating that you could do on the initial product for the U.S. government to make yourself available to different grant opportunities. SBIR is a great one.
Yeah, that's like a long-term goal of ours when you talk about TAP is that's to be capture every service member that coming through it, not like a business sense, but just to make the tool available to them. Say there's a lot of values of being a TAP course and then be like, hey, you guys can create your resume. This Forces Horizon is a tool that you can use. If that's a lot, it makes life we can help them out instead of us going out and cold route and do the traditional marketing route. Having that TAP program that's like kind of the ultimate thing that we can do because we want to help transition servicemen. We want to help all veterans. You can be out for 10 years and our system is still really good for helping because it captures all the civilian side and does that. But it would be great if we get with TAP or equivalent programs across the military. They can come in and they can be like, yeah, I like this system. It's helpful and hopefully help them make an easier transition because it is rough. I can speak a long time about that from personal experience. It's a brutal transition and to make it easier.
Yeah. So certainly resonates with me and probably Ben. And let me ask you this, because we didn't really get into your backgrounds outside of saying, hey, you were both in the army of your different countries, right? Ben, maybe you could go first. Give me some background. So where'd you grow up? What made you join the army? What'd you do in the army? And then when did you get out?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Herefordshire in the UK. Spent some time abroad in Singapore when I was very young, but yeah, mostly in and around Hereford. And then was down at university for a bit and actually started developing an interest in what was a relatively nascent form of AI at that sort of time, mostly through conversations and things that were going on. It was a very different discussion then. And then, yeah, joined the army, spent some time as a detachment commander with the Grenadier Guards, and it was a relatively quiet time. Whilst I went on a couple of exercises abroad, went across to Belize, worked with forces out there, and then COVID hit. So we were running mobile testing units around the UK and responding to that situation. It was a really interesting experience. But I think the main thing that I got from it was seeing what an incredible pathway it can be for people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I think there's less vocal support for the military in the UK. There is support, but I don't think there's culturally, it doesn't hold quite the same place in the national psyche as I believe it does in the States. And I think that's where I saw how beneficial this is, obviously in its primary function, but also as a mechanism by which people from any background can learn not just skills, but qualities and ways of conduct that are really valuable outside of that. And I think that was where it was seeing people, and to be honest with you, it was mostly from the non-commissioned ranks who had incredible skill sets, whose contributions the whole unit was dependent on. Far more, it might be controversial to say this, but I think at least initially during your first year, more so than the junior officers, because they're so central to everything that was going on. And I think seeing people with these skill sets leaving and having the double problem of firstly being so ingrained in military language and culture that they didn't know what was outside and found it very hard through that language to explain what they'd done, but also just not having, an awareness of those avenues. That was really the process that led us to where we are. I was working at an investment bank for a while after I left, but this idea was always there. And something that we're all really passionate about. And it came to a time at the end of last year where we've been doing this for a while. It was working and it is working. And I thought we've just got to go and make this happen. So I quit my job and have been doing this full time since.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, I think you're right. It's in the United States as well. I don't think that anyone that hasn't served in the military has a very difficult time understanding the amount of training and responsibility that everyone is not just capable of, but it's demanded of them. And it can be, I think that there's actually two mindsets that you could probably help people change. One is the NCO himself, right, or herself. So the non-commissioned officer, the staff sergeant, maybe someone that just was in for 4 years, they might be thinking, oh, I wasn't an officer, or I wasn't senior chief, master sergeant, or whatever the service you're in. But a staff sergeant, at least in the U.S. military, and I worked very closely with our partner nations, I know that these soldiers, sailors, airmen, et cetera, Marines, they have an enormous amount of responsibility. They are training people. They are leaders. They learn their skill set, but then they very quickly go on to maybe managing a certain department or training people that are underneath them as they move up. And it's a forced mechanism where hey, we're going to give you training, then we're going to stress you past the point of what you're used to. And you might struggle a little bit, but you'll have great mentors. Then you're going to get it. You're going to do great at it. And we're going to give you more. And we're going to give you more money, more people, more risk, more training, and then more. And it's this cycle, this never ending cycle really makes great, not just program managers, which might be the cliche, Devin, but leaders in different areas from accounting to logistics to probably a lot of jobs that people don't normally think about. Even an infantry troop having, because, oh, hey, they were in the infantry, but they're also managing meticulously ammunition and your uniforms and ordering for the troops. And there's so many different areas of life that you could be involved in. And Ben, you probably didn't think you were going to be running around doing testing for a pandemic, but look at the experience that you gained there, which is pretty incredible. Devin, why don't you give me a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, of course. I'm from the Seattle area, grew up about an hour north of Seattle, between Seattle and the Canadian border up there in Washington State. So I did an untraditional path in the military. I went to college, did my MBA, got into the working world. So I was doing like account executive work for a while. And I was bored. I wanted more with life. So I walked in a recruiting station, shipped off.
But you were selling, when you say account executive, you had a sales job?
Yeah, we were working. We were supporting the sales team with my clients. So not a true sales, more like the sales teams would get the clients and then we'd come out to you and I would make sure those clients were happy and work with
Gotcha.
big insurance companies. So that's what I was doing. Basically a lot of looking at Excel files coming into these massive sales records for them, like all the things they wanted to process. It just wasn't for me. It was eight hours a day sitting in front of the computer. So yeah, we joined the military, went through OCS. I was actually at OCS, Officer Candidate School, that I was selected to go to the Royal Military Academy as like a liaison, which is actually where I met Ben Robb. So I was there for a year with the British Army, did that, came back, and then I was an armor officer. So I was assigned to Fort Carson, where I did my team leader XO time on scouts there, 3rd Brigade. And then, yeah, my wife got an awesome job. So I can be a case study for why people leave the military. My wife got an awesome job and I felt the military wasn't conducive to her pursuing her career in racing. We ended up here in Indianapolis and I am just finishing up my time as detachment commander in the reserve PSYOP unit. That's my career. And then Ben, you kept in contact with after Sandhurst with, and he said he was working on that and it resonated with me because again, I got out last minute for a deployment to Poland when my wife got this job. And so I never had a skill bridge or anything like that. I walked out to the facility world. Oh no, I'm here again. Now I'm in a totally different city. I have no family, no contacts in the Midwest. So it's been a education, searching for roles and everything like that. So yeah, it was a kind of a natural fit when he said, I want to help people transition. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I think true to what a lot of military women and military men do is they see a problem and then they fix it. It's drilled into you, and no pun intended. And so you got out, you had the same thing. Hey, I'm transitioning. Oh crap, I didn't get the assistance that I needed. This is a problem. Why is it not easier? There has to be a tool to help military men and women transition and find those jobs that they're really capable of, right? And it saddens me when I see people with enormous credibility and capability in positions where they're not being fully utilized. Because in how many times you guys have probably heard this a lot being on the outside. I know I hear it all the time where somebody gets out of the military, they were a platoon commander or they were a squadron commander. Or they were doing something that has enormous response and they've received so much training and on the job and the stress levels and everything else to make something very difficult happen, a difficult mission. And then they end up in a company working for someone that hasn't had 0.5% of the training and the experience that they have leading people, and they're trying to figure it out on the job. And that's always difficult.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Like I said, my wife works in racing in Indianapolis and she's in a relatively senior position. What she tells me some days, like general office issues that go on, I'm like pulling my hair out because that's just like day one of even basic training, not even like high level leadership stuff, but it's basic training, like how to treat people I know military gets a bad stereotype. Oh, you can just order everybody around. But I always said when I was a platoon leader, whatever, that if you had to fall back on orders, you failed so hard at that point. If you have not built a functioning team that like trusts you because you guys know how to work together and stuff, like that's the basics right there. And to hear
Yeah.
people like making these mistakes, I'm like, I know half a dozen or more than half a dozen, like dozens of officers who could do that role like, would not have made those mistakes just because they received that training. It always kills me a little bit. But it was fair. A lot of people that came from whatever they came out of college and they never got a single bit of like how to train. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, but they have to learn the hard.
Yeah, and not only that, and Ben, I know you're trying to jump in too, but I just wanted to point out for companies listening that the military has a bad perception from some people because they're watching movies about the military and they see like this kind of hardcore, like swearing, like not in some movies, non-professional, just blowing stuff up. But in reality, and I know that it's not just the US military that has this aspect to it, but the military is a professional environment, and it's actually been the testing ground for inclusivity for the United States for well over 100 years, where when we're talking about some of the problems we have in society and in the work environment, whether it's racially or equality or between the sexes and all this stuff that's going on in the military, it's almost the forcing ground for inclusivity, because what you're doing is by putting policies in place that ensure that you're not discriminating, you are working with, and I think, Ben, you were talking about this earlier, you're working with a group of people that you might not normally be working with, right? They're from different places. They look different from you. But I think the true test in the military is, and it's the one that I think all of us come to the conclusion of, is if you are smart and you can do your job and you're trustworthy, then I can work with you. And we have to treat each other with respect. And it's, do you do your job? And are you completing the training? Are you capable? And when you have that perspective, it's almost ingrained in you, right? So I think that, and I'm not sure what the problems your wife were talking about at work, Devin, but I know a lot of the things that I hear on the civilian side never would happen. It wouldn't even be tolerated in a military unit. It's like seconds. You don't even have to think about things like inclusivity or not offending people because you just don't do it. You accomplish the mission. We have rules, but there's so many skill sets that a strong military person can bring to a company that aren't realized. And I like that your tool is helping translate some of that.
Yeah, I think on that, and similar to a point you made earlier about the sort of training, I think so. I think there is also a difference in the US and the UK. I think there is, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the variety of roles or just the composition of American society compared to British. There is certainly that diversity in the British Army, but I think something that seems almost unique about the US military is that it is that kind of that melting pot that forges people from all sorts of different backgrounds together. I think in the UK it's slightly different. It has the same function, but perhaps it's from different backgrounds in a different sort of way. But I did just want to make the point on something you mentioned earlier, which is that when it comes to training, I think there's an understanding amongst some businesses when people leave that there are officers and then there are people who aren't officers. And I think that's a real misunderstanding, because I think someone can join at the age of 18, even 17, whatever it might be, and they could be a full corporal potentially by the time they're sort of 22, 23. And that's a real responsibility. They're leading a team. They're responsible for not just their sort of operational effectiveness, but also their cohesion as a unit, both in barracks, on base, as well as when they're performing their roles. And it's a huge responsibility. But then I think people in service, it's still towards the lower end of the rank hierarchy. So I think people in those roles will know their responsibility, know their importance, but they won't necessarily, because it's still it's toward the lower end of the rank spectrum throughout all of the ranks. They still, in a sense, are junior. But actually, in reality, when they leave, that's not the case, because they've had management experience, they've had leadership experience, they've led a team. Lots of people don't do that throughout their whole career. You can be a lawyer and not really have to truly manage in the same way a team for a very long time. And I think that's something else that we want to emphasize, is that whilst people might see themselves as being a junior non-commissioned officer in the military, and that comes with the weight of all the ranks above it, that's not the reality in the civilian world. And yeah, I think it's slightly different it is different to the point you're making about diversity, which I think is another incredibly important aspect of it. I think it is an important one for people to recognize.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think just a message to my enlisted military community out there. Imposter syndrome is not something that I can't tell you not to have it as a enlisted or former enlisted troop. But what I can tell you is that, for instance, in the melting pot, as you put it, of the United States, in the Northeast, a lot of people don't even know the difference between an officer and enlisted. They just know that you're in the military. I remember still if someone asks, I have to explain it to them what the difference is because they don't know. Now, different areas have varying levels of experience. If I go to Texas, it's probably going to be a lot different than that. It's a military heavy state. But the point is, a lot of the companies either don't know or don't care. It's how you present yourself in the resume and what skill sets you're bringing to the company. And from personal experience, some of the best, for instance, public sector sales executives I know were enlisted in the Navy or the Army. These are guys that because look, you need to be able to, and companies want to know that the people that they're hiring are not afraid to get their hands dirty and do the work. There's so much value that you're bringing to the company, and you guys are doing a great job of translating it. So before we wrap this up, we need to talk about a couple things, right? Because this is DoD Contract Academy. So this is focused on helping companies sell to the U.S. government. Now, you've already talked about the fact that you have a goal of potentially getting some initial contracts with the U.S. government, potentially in the DoD, potentially with transition assistance and SBIR. And so there's a great avenue for that through SBIR.gov for you guys to take your first steps and put some solicitations or proposals together to get that. So I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about the companies that are listening to this, how you can help them with potentially hiring former military people to work for them. And let's focus on, I would say, maybe two things. Let's talk about account executives or salespeople that can help them sell to the U.S. government, and maybe even program management, something along those, or you could pick another skill set or position in a company, but targeted at, hey, you're selling to the government. How could they work with you? How could a company reach out to you guys and get your assistance, getting matched with some good people to put in their business and help them with their DoD or other government contracting abilities?
So I think there are two sides to that. So the first one is quite simple. So if they sign with us, they will have access to our users, and that's a voluntary thing. So anyone who signs up, they will be getting the benefit of free resume generators, skills mapping, career suggestions, but there is the employment element as well. So in that sense, you'll have a database of well-represented candidates with an HR industry standard resume, which has been vetted to ensure that it best reflects them. So that's just a discussion to be had. If anyone is interested, that'd be fantastic. We always want to work with veteran-friendly sort of hiring partners, and we can do that over email or a call or whatever. But I think the other side is marketing effectively, because anything we do, we're at the stage at the moment where we want to collaborate and share who we're working with, because we think there's synergy in that. It just shows partnership amongst the veteran-friendly hiring community. And so there is the first thing, which is signing up to the platform. But the second thing is affiliation, because we'll be going around events, bases, whatever it might be in the US and then also in the UK, but doing that. So there are two sides to that, really. But yeah, the first one is simple. It's we can provide candidates.
Okay. No, that's great. Devin, did you have anything to add?
No, that's pretty much the basic. Any company that wants to work with us, reach out, we can set that up. And if they are looking for specific roles for people, we can help funnel that. And as more and more veterans start to sign up on our platform, we hope to have a bigger list of different roles, people that may fit into those niches. Because like you said, enlisted service members can make great account executives, even if they don't have the degree to check that particular box. And we want to highlight that.
Yeah. What degree are they really going to get to help them be a good in this case, sales executive to the federal government. And really, the education is already there. They were in the military. This is a good point, I think, for anyone listening, whether they're the company or they're in the military. If you served in the military, even a foreign military, because we have a huge foreign military sales process, by the way, you automatically because we're all about being very focused on this channel when we're talking about selling to the government, right? So based on what you sell, you may be selling to the Air Force, you may be selling to the Navy. Let's say it's the Air Force because that's my favorite. And this has been a very Army heavy podcast here with you two. But so let's say if you're selling to the Air Force, doesn't it make sense to have somebody on your sales team that actually was in the Air Force? Because here's what they're coming with. And look, Devin, I'll use you as an example for the Army, right? You're still in the reserves, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So you have a network of Army people that you know. You have a security clearance. You also can use Army email when you go in to work. You're getting the latest on the trends and the different things that, especially in the reserves, right? But the Army at large as well, what's going on in your particular career field. Even if, let's say I was to hire you to be a sales executive, using you as an example. I know I just pivoted from the Air Force to the Army, but hey, so if I hired you to sell to the Army, it almost doesn't matter what your background was in the Army as far as your actual job, right? So you don't need to necessarily be a cybersecurity guy to sell cybersecurity services to the Army, but you can get onto a military base. You understand all of the acronyms. You have a little learning to do with any company you work with as to what you're providing. And you probably, just by being in the military, by the way, if companies aren't aware, everyone has to go through cybersecurity training every year at a minimum, just as a user. Not to mention that it goes a little bit further than that because we have a lot of things like insider threat and different security environments we have to work in. And cybersecurity is very important. And I'm just using this as an example. So you don't even have to be a cybersecurity officer to have a great understanding of what's in place for every single user in the Army, because you had to go through all the training, not to mention speaking the language, having the network, having the clearance, versus hiring somebody else that doesn't have any of that. And I don't know how many companies that we've worked with. We've advised over 500 companies at this point. Most of them never have set foot on a military installation. So they want to sell to the Air Force. They've never been on an Air Force base. I would say hire yourself someone that actually has that experience. Same thing with the Army, same thing with the Navy.
Well,
And I just want to make that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, even the basic stuff, like an Army guy working for a company that's trying to sell to the Air Force. We may not be Air Force, but when I was in the tanks on the ground, I always knew what planes were flying over our head. Being able to just go point out, hey, I know the difference between all these airframes. Like I can tell the difference between a C-130 and a C-5, which is that's not super high level. That's a quick like Google, but that's just an intuitive thing that most people across the military, all branches will be able to understand. And that's just that little bit of level of understanding that goes a long ways in like ingratiating yourself.
It's a good point. So I shouldn't put people in their own silos, right? Someone that was in the Army is going to have a better understanding of all the military branches compared to somebody that's never served. And so for you guys, and Devin's was in a partner nation military, but there's going to be a kind of unspoken bond or understanding between us because we've all served in the military. And there's nothing that can change that because there's no experience that I have ever been acquainted with that is life-changing, like having served in the military. That's just a bond, right? So you immediately have that kind of unspoken bond in any branch of the service when you walk in there, and you have the understanding. Again, all the things I talked about before, just maybe you didn't serve in that particular branch. So that's a good point. You could certainly, and by the way, I sell for companies to a variety of services, right? So that I didn't come from. So that's certainly an aspect to it as well. That's great. Okay. So companies can come to you guys to help find people for sales executives and maybe some other positions in their government contracting. And that's great. And you guys from here, because it's going to be interesting, because I'd like to have you guys on in another year just to see how far you've come. So not just working with companies selling to the government, and I know you help companies doing a lot of different things, not just that. Our veterans, of course, which is of primary importance, but also taking a look at how you guys are approaching SBIR and hopefully winning some of those contracts. We'd love to hear any progress you've made, and certainly you guys can reach out to us if you want some help with that.
Yeah, we'd love to have a conversation with you in the past. I've already helped us along the path towards pursuing them. And would be really interesting because I think we're in the startup space. We are a military focus, and we're also in a startup space where, both Ben and I are learning as we go. Every day is, oh, we did that wrong or we did that right. And it's just so how happy to hear and show up because I know we're founders and everything. It's a rocky journey and it's a confusing one. So hopefully we can help. I'm sure there's loads. I see them every day on LinkedIn. There's always new defense startups. So that could
Oh yeah.
be interesting.
No, it's great. This silver, just for you guys and for anyone listening, the SBIR process is a 3-phase process where you can win government funding to help develop a technology or solution or modify a solution. So in this case, modifying Force Horizon for government use. And we talked about a variety of areas that you could potentially do that on. Topics will come out. So in this case, it could be a general topic about AI. It could be something more specific about transition for veterans. But you find a topic on sbir.gov that meets or broadly meets the category of technology that you're working on, and you can apply for to win a contract essentially with the government designed to help you develop that technology. So like a phase 1, typically around 150 grand. It varies. Basically doing like a feasibility study. Phase 2, that's where you're really developing something like a prototype demonstration. They all vary a little bit, but those could be up to a couple $1 million. And then phase 3, that's when you're moving on to maybe a standard government contract over time. A powerful program. It's getting a little bit competitive, guys. So just to let you know, but there is my tip for everyone for SBIR this week is going to be not looking at SBIR, but looking at STTR. And don't ask me what the acronym stands for. Same website, sbir.gov. But it basically, very similar program, but you're partnering with a nonprofit, like a university, or you pick your nonprofit, right? So now, of course, since you're partnering, you're not taking the full amount of funding, but the odds of you winning go up pretty dramatically because most companies aren't taking the time to partner with a nonprofit. So this is a good way to eliminate some of that competition and maybe find an area where you're working with a university and winning some of those initial STTRs and bringing some funding in to do something very similar. So again, I would take a look at that. It's a good path forward right now as March of 2024. So that could be totally different a year from now. But as of right now, that's what we're seeing. Awesome.
And
All right, guys.
one more thing before I go, I'll maybe think about it when it comes to defense startups. On the flip side, anybody from the defense world in the US that's looking towards the UK, please reach out to us for hiring needs, one only, but also we have contacts. I know Ben Robb is an awesome contact. He knows loads of people in the UK military, not only for if you're looking to work with the Ministry of Defense, but also hiring people for your own move into the UK. Ben's got that unlocked. Maybe we can make something work together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, that is awesome. That is awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. So yeah, you heard it. If you're hiring, reach out to these guys to hire former military for a variety of positions. If you're moving to the UK and looking for something out there, if you're a veteran, please go on here. Like I said, it's free. You can log in. I just created my profile in about 2 minutes here while these guys were talking at the beginning of the episode. Provide a lot of value for you. You can go to forceshorizon.com to find you. Any other places they should be looking?
On good place, yeah.
Okay, LinkedIn, are they just typing in Devin Smith, or do you have more specific?
Yep, Devin Smith, Forces Horizon, Benedict Robb, Forces Horizon, we'll come up. It's a small company, so.
Roger that. All right. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming on here today. And everybody out there listening, thank you for tuning in this week. You can go to dodcontract.com if you want some more information on what we do or to access past podcast episodes or our newsletter, the GovCon. And until then, we will see you next week. Take care.